Drag Queen Story Hour, which has been in the news a lot recently, is an event hosted by a drag queen in which the performer will read well-loved stories to children in libraries, which all sounds very wholesome because it is. However, there's been far-right homophobic and transphobic hate both online and in real life against this very wholesome event. To talk to us more about this, we have a proud equity member, Joseph Ballard, who plays Titania Trust, who has experienced protest and hate for performing his story time with Titania. And so we're going to reflect on how this has been taken personally, aside from the professional angle, and what it's like dealing with literal Nazis and relating with media and local and national politics. Hi, Joseph. How you doing? You're right.
Hi. Yes, we're good. Thank you. Good to chat to you.
Yeah, great to chat to you. Thanks so much for joining as well. So just to sort of jump in straight away, what is the situation?
Yeah, the situation is, so I began doing story time with Auntie Titania in 2018, and I was touring around libraries around the country and other venues, doing an hour-long event for families and young children. So no harm in it at all, never experienced any problem at all. And then I began to do it in home turf out in North Norfolk at the beginning of August. And suddenly that event was cancelled because of a threat of protest. And since then, I have to admit, it's been like living in a film where my life has completely changed at the moment, where from the events being cancelled, I then suffered abuse, and that's abuse online, whether that's, on different chat forums, different social media, different channels online, but also personally, where I've been messaged personally with threats, with, just horrific emails and messages full of hate. And it does make you question everything you do when what you do professionally is being targeted, but where I've been sort of attacked personally as well. And we had to cancel some events for health and safety concerns, which was the council's decision, not my own. But then we did hold one event in Norwich, and it was fantastic. It was a great event. And we really showed, that these events can go forward in a safe way, and that we shouldn't stop and abide by these people who are dictating to us that these events should stop as well. So I've gone from doing what I see as quite a unique performance that did start off quite unpolitical. To me, it does teach children about diversity and inclusion in the messages and the stories I tell, but there's nothing particularly LGBT plus about what I did. It was Titania Trust as a character performing story time with some song and with some dancing and participation. But what these groups have done, what these haters have done, is they have turned it into something that's much, much more political. And some people say to me, as soon as you dress up in drag, as soon as any of us dress up differently to what's expected of us, it becomes political. And that's one thing we have to remember, is that drag is political, whether we want it to be or not. And it depends how you take it. So right now I'm thinking about my own practice and what I do. And actually everything I've done is political, and it's all got a different reason, and it's all got a different output. And right now I have to channel my energy into fighting this current battle.
Yeah, 100%. And so you received a lot of solidarity when the kind of Nazis and other protesters were, campaigning against your very wholesome act, really. But what kind of solidarity did you get in the No to Hate demo?
Yeah, so with that, what I found is, as soon as it hit the papers that an event had been cancelled and there was a protest, I had thousands of messages of support from people all around the world. And that's when it became apparent to me that it wasn't just some angry parents. It was actually part of a far-right group. And there were a few far-right groups involved, and there are ongoing campaigns against them. They're spreading hate, and drag artists and libraries telling stories to kids is just one thing. It's the tip of the iceberg. They've got a whole agenda that they're going about, from climate change to cancer to COVID, you name it, they've got it. And it was through messages of solidarity that I started to build a picture of actually who these people were. And through those messages, people offered support practically, logistically, emotionally. And when we did have the event on the 17th of August at the Millennium Library in Norwich, we had, around 15 protesters turning up from around the country. So they didn't show up like they said they would, but we had over 500 people showing up in solidarity, and these people came to support us. It became a no to hate demo for Norwich, and they used Titania's face and my slogan there, saying, you know, Norwich does not welcome hate. And what we had people from different unions there, different activist groups. We had different professions being represented, and we even had some wrestlers there who were there in their wrestling gear ready to show. And you know what? It's an amazing sight when you see drag artists and then wrestlers side by side, you know, shouting no to hate and in Titania we trust. That was an amazing sight and sound to see. And, you know, I've only seen stuff in photos and videos afterwards because I was sort of kept locked away in there. But to think you had like drag artists and wrestlers, you know, hand in hand almost outside the Millennium Library in support. And what struck me is that the love and support out there greatly, greatly outweighs the negativity and the hate. So where I've received threats and aggressive threats if I left my house, if I do the events, I had to like live somewhere else for 2.5 weeks so I can go back to my own home because they published my address on the internet. I've got cameras around my house, but it's that support and that solidarity that has kept me going. And it's like stoked up that fire in my belly where at the start it was fear, and it was, you know, fear in what I'm doing, questioning what I do, reflecting on it. But actually it's the solidarity that painted the full picture of what we're looking at. And this is a much, much bigger battle than drag artists and libraries here in Norfolk. It's a much, much bigger battle than just me having some threats against me. But now we are looking at, you know, this is a campaign against the far right who are trying to get under the skin of the media, trying to get under the skin of the people on the street, and they're trying to find the common ground. And obviously common ground is children's safety, which is obviously really paramount. We agree on that. But what these groups have done is they've used children's safety, and then they've used slurs to me, calling me a paedophile and a groomer, and that I'm going to harm these children. And that is where it's wrong. They've gone from all drag queens are groomers to all gays are groomers, and they said Joseph Ballard is a groomer, and they've put that out there. But it's a bigger fight than that. This is where we're fighting against the far right, and that's where the solidarity really, really shines through.
Yeah, you almost see there's like a pipeline of these far right talking points that then make their way into various different news outlets. We see that around trans rights, which have become this sort of huge political football for right wingers to be talking about at the expense of people's actual lives. I think it's kind of amazing, like you say, that, you know, there were 15 far right protesters at this at this sort of stupid demo, and then 500 people in solidarity in a kind of counter protest. I just love the thought that like drag artists and wrestlers were like the collaboration we never knew we needed.
Yeah. It's a great sight, and those images, you know, people sent the videos and photographs, but what there was a massive lack of was these images and photographs in the media, where, you know, the media, the local media has been there by my side supporting me. You know, they've been there getting my story out there, but what they have been afraid to say is to name any far right groups or even use the term far right extremists. They're talking about protesters. They're talking about people rallied together. They've not actually used the word far right extremists. And I've done the local press, I've done local TV, I've done national and local radio, I've done international media as well. So if any of you are in Norway in October, you'll see a big feature there in the Arts and Culture magazine there. But what is lacking is photographs of the supporters and that rally, where there are loads of photographs of those protesters, but actually, you know, they need to capture the scale of the support that was there. And that's really, really important. And what's been interesting with the media is, you know, the lack of, you know, identifying who these groups are. We don't want to name them. We don't want to give them that profile. But actually, people need to know we're dealing with far-right extremists who are very, very dangerous. We need to know that for the start. And yes, some papers have said it's all questionable. What do you expect doing that in a library? But even newspapers like the Daily Mail, which is a newspaper that I wouldn't actually mind if they said something bad about me, even still, you know, painted me as the victim. And they did actually use the term far-right groups, which astounded me totally. The Sunday Times article was more about how I feel about it, you know, personally. But again, the media, and working with the media on this, is they are afraid to, you know, to call out these far-right groups, whether it's their readership or maybe the media doesn't want to get into this storm as well. So for me, I've reflected a lot on how our media responds to something like this too.
It's absolutely wild that the Daily Mail are more willing to talk about the far right than than other media outlets, especially as
Yeah.
like, you know, like your address was posted publicly on these like far right forums. Was I mean, it seems obvious as well, but like, were you scared around that time?
Yeah, when I started to get the abuse coming in and a few threats, it was, I thought, oh, these are some of them are from America, for example, or some of them is a copy and paste thing. I was sent a new version of the Bible that said that HIV and AIDS didn't exist, but God would strike me down with it if I dared do the event. You know, silly things like that came up. So we had some religious stuff being kicked in there as well. But I was scared for my own safety, and I couldn't go back to my own home for 2.5 weeks. I had to stay somewhere else. I was looking over my shoulder. I wore sunglasses throughout the whole of August, not because of the sunshine, but in case someone threw something in my face. Because some of the other drag artists that have experienced this across the country, you've got Ada HD, who's doing a drag queen story hour tour. You've got Cherry on Top in Northern Ireland. They've had threats, things like throwing acid or ammonia in our faces has been one of them. There's been other threats happening. One of the other artists was threatened to be kidnapped and arrested under citizen's arrest. And I have to admit, being snuck into the library in Norwich to do this event, it was like being in a James Bond film or something. And my fear was like, what are they going to do? What could they do to me? What might they do in front of children, which was my other worry. But also, if they kidnap me, what are they going to do? And these fears, they go through your head. And it's only when I'm back at home with cameras, I do have to think about where I'm going, what I'm doing, and I'm still a bit unsure about going out to places on my own at the moment, because when your home address is being published and your life is being published online, you never know who's going to be after you. And these are nut jobs. Like, we know people with these extremist views are nut jobs, but you start to read what they said, where they're going, and they're very unpredictable. And at the moment, we all have to look after each other, and I always have to think about my safety and my whereabouts.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, well, mate, full solidarity, because it's absolutely horrific to be having to think about this, particularly when, as we said in a previous chat, this is a relatively this is a wholesome act.
Yeah. It's telling stories, award-winning stories, and best-selling stories to children. It's wholesome stuff. It teaches about diversity and inclusion. But like I said at the start, these haters, these groups, they've turned it into something much, much more political. And that just shows where we've got to go. That shows, actually, this is political, this is where we're going. And those messages that I want to convey in Storytime with Auntie Titania, about inclusivity, about diversity, about love, and about kindness, it shows that is even more so important in today's world.
I just want to know, what's next for you with this kind of struggle. It's almost like, you're on the front line in the kind of ridiculous culture war. Yeah, like I said, I just can't I can't believe that the media don't stress this more, that it's literally, this is the far right, this is literal Nazis using this as a kind of political football, pretending that it's about children's safety.
We've got self-admitting Nazis. So one of them actually went up to a police officer at one of the protests and claimed to be a Nazi Buddhist, and said to the officer, "What are you going to do?" You look at their websites, where one of the websites where they published my address and said what people should do to me if they got hold of me. You've got pictures of Hitler on there, and it's just in plain sight that we are dealing with real life Nazis. And if anything, it's put the fear in me that these groups actually exist. But if anything, it shows that, as a movement, whether that's the left movement, or whether that's the movement as decent human beings, it shows this is now a fight. I have felt like I'm on the front line, and they'll probably pick on someone else next, because I'm putting up a fight. I'm dealing with the authorities, I'm dealing with the police, with these people. But if anything, this has spurred me on to actually go, this is now my cause in life. This is where I'm going. And once I've dealt with Nazis, you do feel a bit invincible. You feel a bit like, wow, I've dealt with some of the worst that humankind has got to offer now. Who's next? And I'm ready for that next battle.
Oh, mate, that's amazing. Well, full solidarity, and thank you so much for joining us for this chat.
Well, thank you. It's important we get the message out there, and solidarity with all the other drag artists, or anyone who's being put under pressure at the moment, because we've got to keep going, and it just shows why it's so important.
Legend. Loads of love, mate.
Lovely. Awesome.